Hello, welcome to our interactive version of Science, Tech, Nature and San Miguel de Allende. We'll be doing this until the coronavirus blows over and then we can get back to meetings. And I sure do miss them already. The Tuesday was the sort of heart of my life. I really enjoy going to those meetings and being the barker and not being able to see your lovely faces. It just breaks my heart. So what we're going to do is I'm going to do a presentation here, and this is sort of experimental. It's my first try, and see how it works out. And if you would give me some feedback down below there on the YouTube, you can scroll down and you can leave comments. I'm also going to be placing my links down there as well, the ones that I'll be talking about. So do remember to scroll down either during the discussion here that I'm doing or afterwards. So let's get going. First thing I want to talk about is the coronavirus. And I think that Mexico is going to be fairly hard hit by the coronavirus. They're not really taking it seriously at the moment, and they're going ahead with this huge festival, which is guaranteed to infect a lot of people. I don't understand why they're allowing this, but they are. So what do you have to do? Well, you being probably the chances are that most of you are in the 60s and 70s like myself, and if that's the case, then you have to take real good care of yourself. And taking good care of yourself means that you've got to minimize your social interactions with other people, social physical interactions with other people. If everybody did this around the world, if they reduced their social interactions by about 75%, that would flatline the coronavirus. It wouldn't go away, but you wouldn't have a pandemic, which is what we're probably about to experience both in the United States, thanks to our administration not moving fast enough, and also here in Mexico, where I don't know what's going on and why they're allowing things like the huge concerts to happen. Anyway, so if everybody did that, including you, minimize your interactions with other people, and you should be safer than being sociable. So the other thing is you do not want to get the coronavirus during the peak of the pandemic, because the hospitals are going to be absolutely crammed filled with people. They're all wanting to use the respirators, and they only have a few of them. Is it ventilators or respirators? I might have the term wrong, but you get the idea. You want them because they help you to breathe when you're in trouble during the fever, and so you don't want to be there during the peak, and therefore minimizing your social interactions, your physical social interactions, is really important. Okay, so I want to show you this cool site here. This basically is an interactive site that you can use in Google. It's built in Google Earth, but they've done an overlay, and it's very good, very interesting overlay. Shows you where all the outbreaks are and what stage they're at. So if we move in here, you can see if we're in Mexico, and you can see there's Monterrey, there's Durango has one, and as you can see down here, here's Querétaro, and Querétaro, as you can see over here, has 4 confirmed cases of people who presently have the virus. And as you know, San Miguel is just a short distance away. So in all likelihood, it's probably here. It's just not been reported yet. This link you will find, again, I mentioned, you'll find it down below. So go down there and you'll be able to click on it and check it out, and you can save it to your own bookmarks should you want to. Well, after that grim bit of news, maybe something a little brighter. And on the other end of the spectrum, um, I was going to do a short presentation of Mr. One, as I've called it, last week, but we ran out of time, and Irving Kirsch's presentation was so good and so interesting. I just wanted to let it run out to its end, and I have no regrets about that. You have to be flexible if you're the barker. So anyway, I'm going to move on to the next thing, which is about MR1. And what is MR1? Well, let's watch a little bit of it. I won't play all of it because I want to get through this. But again, the links down below will have the link to the rest of this fairly short video, and I heartily recommend that you watch it. All right.
People often wonder, and they ask us quite often, why there isn't a cure for cancer yet. And the answer that we have given is that cancer isn't just one thing. It's this big umbrella term for a bunch of different conditions where cells grow out of control. While there are, of course, treatments for some types of cancer, different cancers are different enough that there's nothing that works for all of them. There's no universal cure. But it turns out there might be. Researchers from Cardiff University in Wales may have found a way to treat all cancers, or at least a whole lot of them, and they just kind of stumbled onto it. The researchers weren't searching for cancer therapies. They were looking for ways to fight bacteria with immune cells called killer T cells. As the name implies, these cells kill things, specifically things that aren't good for your body. But unlike other immune cells, they don't target bacteria or viruses directly. Instead, they go around interrogating the body's own cells, trying to sniff out which ones might be hiding pathogens inside them, and when they find an infected cell, they kill it. But not all killer T cells are the same. There are different types that use slightly different proteins called receptors to check out cells. Often, these receptors are somewhat specific to the invader they're hunting for, but the researchers were looking for a kind of T cell that can detect lots of different bacteria. So they pulled a bunch of killer T cells from blood samples and tested their infection spotting abilities. The test the team was using just so happens to employ a kind of cancer cell that's easy to infect with bacteria, and a number of different T cells showed promise when the scientists set them loose on those infected cancer cells. But one was especially ruthless. Unfortunately, in further experiments, it killed all of the cancer cells, not just the ones with bacteria inside them, so it wasn't what they were looking for. But it did pique their curiosity. Now, it's not that weird for a T cell to kill cancer cells, because T cells don't just hunt for infections, they are also in charge of keeping cancers in check. And over the past several years, scientists have started harnessing the power of these cells to fight cancer. In CAR T immunotherapy, for example, T cells are removed from a person's body, genetically programmed with a receptor that can spot the person's cancer, and then injected back in to seek and destroy. But we can't do this for all cancer patients yet, because we don't have good receptor targets for every type or even subtype of cancer. It's back to that whole cancers aren't all the same thing. But I digress. Point is, it wasn't super surprising that the researchers had found a T cell that killed this particular type of cancer. But before just discarding or shelving them to continue the hunt for bacteria-killing T cells, they decided to see what happened with some other cancer types too. And they worked against all of them. Lung cancer, colon cancer, bone cancer.
So I'm going to stop it there, and I hope I've piqued your curiosity on that one. I'm not going to play it all because I don't want to transgress the copyrights. And I do want to give a special call out to the Science Show, because their presentations are excellent. They are also part of the same people who do the Crash Course History, Crash Course Economics, and various others. And I'll make a link to a couple of those at the bottom. Just wonderful instructional videos that are a lot of fun to watch. I will go on with a couple of more things that I can show you here. Let me put this one away. And you can see I have done a Google search on the MR1, and you can see here that it appears several times, many times, in just a regular Google search. if you go to Google Scholar, which are actual papers that are written about the MR1, you can see that there's plenty of information about that here as well. And I also I run the CRISPR-Cas9 forum and did a quick search to see if there was anything on MR1 there, and sure enough, there is stuff there as well. So MR1 is a real thing, not just a cute idea in the mind of a sensational paper. So the next item on the agenda is the subject of killer balloons. And back in September, I gave a quick presentation on the Japanese using the jet stream, which had been newly discovered. In fact, they're the ones who discovered it. They weaponized it using the jet stream to bring dangerous balloons that were filled with hydrogen that would they would send them aloft, and they would cross the Pacific, and then they were timed to go off over the American continent, which is not very nice. So for a visual, here's a little animation of the jet stream.
Atmosphere's weather, including bitter cold snaps.
And you can see here how the jet stream flows right across America. Of course, this thing waves at different times and in different directions. In the summer, it goes more over Central America. In the winter, it gets a little more wavy and more extreme.
Because it plays a role in weather extremes, climate scientists are striving to understand its changing dynamics. The jet stream races from west to east at speeds of up to 275 miles an hour, undulating.
So you can see that this is a fast way of delivering a lethal weapon from point A to point B. I'll show you just a little piece of the documentary that we watched in September, just to give you an idea of the impact of these thousands of balloons that they sent from Japan, mostly built by school children, which makes it sort of extra evil, if you ask me, to the United States.
Of the 9,300 balloons launched from Japan, only 212 were confirmed as having arrived in the United States and Mexico, landing as far east in the US as Michigan, and a further 73 were confirmed coming down in Canada. The only fatalities caused by balloon bombs occurred on the 5th of May 1945 on Gerhardt Mountain near Bly, Oregon. A picnicking party of 1 adult and 5 children were killed instantly when they dragged an unexploded Imperial Japanese Navy 15-kilogram anti-personnel bomb out of the woods. These 6 people are the only known fatalities caused by enemy action on the mainland United States during the Second World War. It is not known whether any of the balloon bombs started forest fires, as was intended. In April 1945, the Japanese ceased their balloon launches, largely because the American media blackout had told them nothing about the success or failure of the campaign. What remains certain, however, is the fact that many of the bombs remain unaccounted for, and after over 70 years of deterioration, could pose a serious risk to anyone who discovered one of these strange relics in the American countryside today. The balloons certainly spread themselves all over North America. One balloon bomb struck a power line in Washington state, cutting off electricity to the Hanford Engineer Works, where the United States was manufacturing plutonium for the top-secret Manhattan Project. 45 bombs landed in Oregon, 37 in Alaska, 28 in Washington state, and 25 in California. 7 landed in Nebraska, including Omaha. Another landed 10 miles from Detroit, and another near Grand Rapids. The balloon bombs have continued to turn up since the end of World War II. In November 1953, a balloon bomb was detonated by the Canadian Army in Edmonton, Alberta, while the US Air Force found another in Alaska in 1955. In southwest Oregon in 1978, yet another Japanese bomb was found and destroyed. These bombs remain a threat even today. Proof of this claim was graphically demonstrated in Canada in 2014 when the remains of a balloon bomb's gondola, including still live ordnance, was discovered near the town of Lumbee. A live bomb was discovered dramatically embedded nose first in the ground. Deemed too dangerous to move, a Canadian bomb disposal team put some C4 on either side of it and blew it to pieces. The metal ring and other pieces are now on display at the Lumbee Museum. We can be sure that this is not the last one out there. So, if you are a camper, a hiker, or indeed a Sasquatch, you might want to tread carefully in the forests of the Pacific Northwest and Northern California.
But this wasn't the last time that killer balloons were made. Not to be outdone, although not using the jet stream, the British decided in World War II that this was a great way to disrupt the German industry and create just general mayhem. Let's pop over to here.
And it was an incident with barrage balloons that first gave the British the idea of using balloons as weapons. The night of the 17th to 18th of September 1940, a severe gale caused several barrage balloons to break their moorings. Carried by the prevailing west to east winds, the balloons caused havoc in Europe. In Sweden and Denmark, balloons caught on overhead power lines, shorting out electricity and also interfering with railway operations. One broke the Swedish international radio station's transmitting antenna. When Prime Minister Winston Churchill was given a report on the incident, he saw the potential for disruptive balloon attacks on Germany and occupied Europe, and ordered the Air Ministry to look into it. The Air Ministry was not happy. The Ministry of Aircraft Production was dead against the plan. It argued that balloon weapons would be both ineffective and consume resources needed for aircraft production. But it was the Admiralty that saved the project from oblivion. Captain Gerald Bannister, Director of Boom Defence, thought the plan had real merits. It was largely because of the prevailing west to east wind that favoured British attacks on Germany. The Germans would not be able to make similar attacks on Britain. As the runaway barrage balloons had proved, overhead power lines were very vulnerable to damage. A balloon that dragged a long wire over such cables would short them out. Such damage would have dire knock-on effects for German industry and communications. The Admiralty ran some trials and concluded that there would be between a 10 and 75% chance of a balloon's wire coming into contact with a high-voltage overhead line during a 30-mile or 48-kilometre transit along the ground. As well as power lines, Germany had plenty of forests and heathland, so the British also planned to send balloons equipped with incendiaries, a technique later refined by the Japanese, who launched balloon bombs across the Pacific to attack the western US later in World War II. The Japanese balloons were much bigger and made of paper. They carried a mixed payload of incendiary and anti-personnel bombs, and thousands landed all across the western United States and Canada and even Mexico, but caused little damage and only a handful of casualties. Perhaps unsurprisingly, I've already made a video about the Japanese Fugo or windship weapons. Please do check out the end screen for a link. Causing fires would divert Germans away from productive industries to be employed as fire watchers, or so was hoped. And the Admiralty rebuffed the Ministry of Aircraft Production's argument that a balloon bombing campaign would be too expensive. The Royal Navy had 100,000 unused weather balloons in storage, made from scarce white latex rubber. The balloons were small, at 8 feet or 2.4 meters diameter when inflated with hydrogen. They were fitted with a very simple timing and regulating mechanism. When launched, a slow-burning fuse was lit. The length of the fuse was calibrated to the estimated arrival time over German territory. Initially, the balloon would ascend rapidly to 25,000 feet, or 7,600 meters. Then an internal cord would tighten, releasing some of the gas from the top of the balloon. This would cause the balloon to slowly descend as the gases were evacuated. Then the slow-burning fuse would release a bung in a can of mineral oil. As the oil slowly dripped out, the balloon became lighter, slowing its descent. Then the balloon's weapon could be released. Several different payloads could be carried. A long wire was the most popular. The trailing wire was 700 feet or 210 meters of hemp cord. The cord itself was attached to 300 feet or 91 meters of steel wire hanging from beneath the balloon. The drip of oil from the can would stop and the balloon float along at 1,000 feet or 300 meters, dragging the wire for about 30 miles or 48 kilometers, and hopefully hitting a power line. Incendiary devices could be delivered by the balloons and consisted of three basic types. The first was codenamed Beer and was a cylindrical container with 7 or 8 half-pint bottles inside. The bottles, which looked a bit like beer bottles, were actually special incendiary grenades filled with white phosphorus, benzene, water, and raw rubber. The grenades would drop automatically and ignite on shattering. Another weapon, codenamed Jelly, consisted of cans of incendiary jelly, each can holding 1 gallon or 4.5 liters. A fuse ignited it, producing a fireball of 20 feet or just over 6 meters in circumference. The last weapon was codenamed Socks, and were long, thin bags, each weighing 6 pounds or 2.7 kilos, fitted with wood wool soaked in boiling paraffin wax, each balloon carrying 3 of these socks. The balloon weapons were launched by Women's Royal Naval Service or WRENS personnel, with the assistance of Royal Marines and some male naval personnel from HMS Beehive, a shore facility based at Felixstowe Ferry Golf Club in Suffolk on England's east coast, beginning in March 1942. It was dangerous work, and many women were burned handling the balloons when the weapons detonated accidentally. An astounding 99,142 of these balloons were released between the 20th of March 1942 and the 4th of September 1944, causing some damage in Germany. Over 54,000 of the balloons were the wire type, and power outages and damage to overhead cables was reported in Germany, France, Denmark, and elsewhere in occupied Europe. A 1946 report concluded that £54 million damage in today's money was caused, and this was a conservative estimate. German fighters were diverted to try and shoot them down. The cost of each weapon was only £96 in 2019 money, so costing Britain just over £9.5 million in today's money, a very cost-effective offensive indeed. Operation Outward's biggest recorded success was achieved on the 12th of July 1942, when a wire balloon struck a 110 kilovolt power line near Leipzig. A resultant circuit breaker failure at Berlin power station started a huge blaze that destroyed the power station completely. Some forest fires were also reported near Berlin and Tilsit in East Prussia. It was, to say the least, a novel use of a humble weather balloon, but its success would lead to American balloon bomb tests during the Cold War.
This documentary was brought to us by Mark Felton Productions, and I highly recommend going there and seeing his other documentaries. And do remember, please, when you do go to these things, to
subscribe and share, and also help support.
Hit the like button, and you can also subscribe to the channel as well if you want to see when he comes out with new stuff. But very informative, short, little documentaries, mostly dealing with with World War II, but many others as well. Highly recommend it. Staying ever so briefly on the subject of jet streams, we are not the only planet that has jet streams. Here is a larger gaseous outer giant, Jupiter, that has jet streams that would put ours to shame. I have placed the link for this down below, and highly recommend that you you check that one out. It is amazing mankind's ability to kill each other using the force of nature to assist. What truly devious, hairless apes we are. So moving on to a much brighter note, here is something that describes so beautifully the interconnectivity between the microcosm and the macrocosm.
Out of, followed potentially by the plunge. Now, last but not least, we've got one of the coolest scalability studies I've ever seen. We know that the cosmic web resembles a brain, a neural network, complex capillary system, the interconnected lights of human civilization looking down on the land at night, and apparently, slime mold. They have dug as deep into the slime behavior as possible and found that it is so highly efficient it resembles the intelligence of electricity to take the path of least resistance, and it ends up resembling the cosmic web. Folks, you've got both the press release with the video and the journal article with all the extra images linked in your list today. They believe they have already seen confirmation of the paradigm that most of the material is in the strands, the cosmic web, which is a universal highway and feeding.
And I have taken the opportunity to place those links so that they'll be available for you. Here's the one on the astronomers use slime mold model to reveal dark threads in the cosmic web. And if you're even more interested, here is the paper as well, and that's also sitting in the links. One of my pet peeves in science is when there is a little data and much speculation. And I find that is true for both the black holes and for the Big Bang, which is continuously being revised because it has to. And it reminds me of a wonderful quote that a friend sent me. The greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance. It is the illusion of knowledge. And that's by Steve Hawking. And I'll go here to this one and play this little piece here to illustrate that point.
The cosmic timeline is not difficult to understand. Before the formation of galaxies and stars was the formation of atoms, before that subatomic particles, cooling and expanding from the initial moment of time, the Big Bang. Problem is, the cosmic timeline is wrong. The cosmic timeline problem was addressed in part by Dr. Fulvio Melia in our full plasma cosmology film. The problem was that if the universe began 13.8 billion years ago, as is said to have occurred, then we see some things in the early cosmos that present some challenges to that paradigm. The first is the formation of supermassive galaxies, which formed so quickly that at that point in the cosmos, the first stars are supposed to still be coming together and igniting, yet they see numerous cosmic monsters with the maturity of ages in deep space. He also mentioned the quasars, the powerful cosmic jets. With such power, they must have incredible masses, which is also a problem at an age in the universe when stars a billionth of its size are supposed to still be forming. Now, in the wake of that film, we've seen the discovery of enormous early protoclusters and galaxy groups, again, at ages that challenge what was supposed to be going on way back then. But beyond the supermassive galaxies, the quasars, the galaxy clusters, and protoclusters, let's hear the knockout punch from our October 2019 short summary. Perhaps the most damning evidence comes from individual stars. They say that the earliest that stars could have formed was 200 million years after the Big Bang, but there are at least 2 stars we know of, not just in our own galaxy, but within 1,000 light years, that are as old as the Big Bang or older. Methuselah's star is thought to be 14.5 billion years old, maybe older, and is only 200 light years away. The galaxy is 100,000 light years across, so what are the chances it's the only one that exists? The only one that exists in our galaxy. Now to summarize, the universe age is wrong. It's one thing to look deep into time and see strange things, but when you have a star 14.5 billion years old, traipsing around only 200 light years away, you have a major problem in the cosmic timeline. There are likely dozens of Methuselahs just in our galaxy alone, and as fun to think about as that is, the implications for the universe are virtually unexplored, ignored as a problem by cosmologists. Does this seem simple to understand? Yes, it is, but finding the answer might be a bit more difficult. Be safe, everyone.
This lovely snippet was taken from Suspicious Observers, which is one of the stupidest names I've ever heard a website called. I find it to be a very informative website. There is some lunacy in it, and you have to sort of work your way around that. But most of the stuff I find extremely instructional and very much worth a gander. The next link I have is a wonderful documentary on gene editing. It's an hour and a half long, so needless to say, I'm not going to be playing the whole thing here. But again, down in the links and at your leisure, highly recommend watching it. I'll give you a quick preview now, just so you can see a little bit of it.
This is Leica, this is Nova, and this is Joy. Our pig is the most advanced genome-modified animal running on the Earth.
The babies that came out of that are now adults, and the adults are having their own babies. So it seems like making that many edits is completely compatible with a happy, healthy pig. I tell people to be visually underwhelmed by my lab. It's just a bunch of small rooms with usually very few people in them. But in terms of what I see, it's very exciting. I've never really felt the mad scientist was realistic for anybody that I knew, including myself. My lab has been accused of taking science fiction and turning it into science fact. I consider that very high praise. But turning science fiction into science fact is not mad. It actually can be quite useful. Aging reversal is the term that I prefer. You know, I'm 63 years old. I feel like I just barely got trained to do my job last year. And so now you're going to pull the plug and recycle me. This doesn't make sense. We need to be cautious in that, you know, there's this whole population problem. So we could do that if we have a place to put all those people.
And there you are. If you want to live past a regular lifetime, maybe in order to save the world from overpopulation, they'll send you to Mars. The next thing I want to touch base on is the interconnectivity between the sun and the behavior of animals on our planet. And it's just extraordinary how we find through the cosmos, through the microcosm to the macrocosm, these amazing links that pull everything together. So what you see here, this is the sunspot cycle, and you can see every 11.11 years roughly, the sun it reverses its polarity. So every 22 years, it goes from negative to north to south, and south to north in its magnetic polarity. So it keeps changing all the time, every 11.11 years. So here we are, here we would be at a negative polarity or north polarity, and here we go down here. Now it's south, and then it's north, and then it's south, and so on and so on. And so what are sunspots? These are sunspots, and they're absolutely huge. In this one here, the Earth could comfortably fit inside this sunspot on the sun. They can last anything from a day to several days, so they are very interesting objects. Sunspots belt out huge amounts of radiation and magnetic fields that wash over the Earth's magnetic field and its protective layer that shields us from the harmful rays of the sun. Would you believe it, that they actually have an effect? And as you can see in this article here. So they've done the calculations, and as you can see, this is an article that's been done in the Adler Planetarium, so it's probably very bona fide, and the comparisons between the sunspot cycles and the stranding of whales is something that appears to be tangible. So that makes for a very interesting article, and it too will be down below. I'm shifting now to technology, and it does hover ever so dangerously near the realm of politics, but the internet and the has changed things so much in terms of social media. This is really worth taking a look at. And as you can see from this infographic, and I'll sort of move through here a little bit, you can see that all the major news organizations, just about everything you watch on cable or TV, is owned by the very rich. I can scroll down here. You can see every one of these. There you go, Jeff Bukes with his assets and everything that he owns. You can see their investments. It is an excellent infographic, by the way. I don't know who did the research on this, but it's just really, really pretty spectacular. Oh, there's Rupert Murdoch. There's one of my favorites. So you can see that it just goes on and on. So all this stuff, all this is what you watch on cable TV incessantly. It's information that's broadcast at you. And when you consider that it is from a particular strata of life in terms of the wealth distribution, it should give you pause for thought. So if you want to be a well-informed human being and be able to get your news analysis from a variety of different spectrums, political spectrums, this article here is really, really interesting. It also shows a list down at the bottom of internet-based news and information. So you have to go online to get this information. You can't get it by just switching on your television. But rather than me telling you about this, because I have a rather subjective point of view, here's a lovely essay, which is only about 6 minutes long. And we won't watch the whole of it. Again, down below if you want to see the video, but I'll play you a little bit of it now.
For all of the history up until this point, our communication structures have, for the most part, especially mass media systems, have been very top-down. And they've been controlled by a few people that had distribution control. If you look back, the church was really the first broadcast network. The church built out a very defined architecture of communication that was coming from a centralized place where very few people could have the word of God come down to them, and they had the ability to transcribe. This was at a point when literacy was very rare, and so you had only a few people that were literate that could transcribe this holy word. And then they would distribute it out to a local market where you had a big impressive building that had lots of iconography and lots of beautiful images inside of it, and the tallest building usually in the town, and they would ring the steeple at 8 a.m. and we would all congregate for mass, and we would listen to one message from one incontrovertible truth from one source. And that's not too dissimilar from television architecture, right? You have a group of people in suits in New York or in Los Angeles, and they're deciding what's going to be on television, and then they distribute it to those towers, and at 7 p.m. prime time, we aggregate around a television that's been brought into our home, and we watch this one incontrovertible truth and this signal from a top-down approach. And when the internet started enabling people, first with this underlying network architecture of TCP/IP that allowed us to transcend time and distance, that allowed any node on the network to contribute to the system. And then we started seeing things like video sharing and photo sharing that allowed us all to become publishers. And then we had this kind of, now this layer of social that is redefining everything, where every single person is now a contributing node on the network, and every person that is part of that uses emotions and memes and content to distribute things in a horizontal fashion. And so what that's doing is that is destroying the ability to discern what is authentic, what is not, what's real, what's fake, what's commercial, what's non-commercial, what's sponsored, what's non-sponsored, what's a good idea versus a bad idea. And so when we exist in this free-form society where every node on the network can contribute something to the network, and it has no checks and balances, if you will, there is no top-down authority that's editing it or deciding what's real or not, then suddenly it becomes every node on the network's responsibility, real having to learn a pattern of behavior that we're all responsible for the propagation of this content.
I found this conversation on Big Think, and it's really worth taking a look at their YouTube site. There's a lot of interesting conversations there that you really need to see. And to start to wrap up for today, this was sent to me by Mike Poor, one of our SciTechNature members. And I'm going to, from now on, invite everybody who comes across interesting links that they think that we should all see, please send them to me. You can do it through the zappyramid@gmail.com, and I shall start placing them onto our virtual get-togethers. And I think that would make it a little bit more personal and a little more fun. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this, and please give me some feedback. Let me know what you think. I'm going to try and bring other presenters onto this, so I'm very excited about it. I'm hoping that we will see some more of this in the near future, and I'll even show you how it's put together and how it's done, because my son Ari just showed me only 2 days ago. So be well, everybody. And I'll send you another one of these the following Tuesday. Goodbye.